I don't know. Here we go. Trying to figure out that this shouldn't be so complicated. Okay, here we go. Let me move this up a little. Ah, much better. Okay, so this is a sikha about Parsha Midbar. Parsha Midbar always comes before Shavuos. So we always look for a theme in Parsha Midbar that's connected to Shavuos because it always comes before Shavuos. Let's read. Every year we read the portion of Midbar before the Yontif of Shavuos. The reason is given is to interpose a Shabbos between the rebuke of Parsha B'chukaisai and the commemoration of the giving of the Torah. So Parsha B'chukaisai, which is the last parsha in Chumash Vayikra, has in it the rebuke of Hashem to the Jewish people if they don't follow the ways of the Torah. There's a second rebuke in Chumash Devarim, in Parsha Kisavai, where Moshe Rabbeinu repeats it. That always comes out before Rosh Hashanah. But both of them, the parsha before Rosh Hashanah and the parsha before Shavuos, always has one. It doesn't come right before the Yontif. It comes 1 week in between, a buffer. Why? Well, part of the reason is because we want to make a buffer because we don't want to come into Yontif after reading such a parsha, such terrible punishments that are predicted if you don't follow in the ways of the Torah. It's not a good feeling to come into Yontif that way. So it's good to have them a couple weeks before so you get your act together. But then, you want to be nice, come in with a nice feeling. So Parsha Bamidbar always comes before because it's at least one parsha in between B'chukaisai and Shavuos. Sometimes it's two parshas. So the reason is to interpose between the rebuke and the giving of the Torah. Nevertheless, since all Torah matters are characterized by precise detail, it follows that there must be an intrinsic connection between Bamidbar and the coming holiday, and that this reading contains a lesson that prepares us to receive the Torah. Okay? So it's not just that Bamidbar has to be a buffer in between. There must be some kind of content to Parsha Bamidbar that is a appropriate preparation for receiving the Torah. Parsha Bamidbar speaks primarily of the census of the Jewish people. Indeed, because of this reckoning and the census described in Parsha Pinchas, the entire book is referred to as numbers, right? Because the English word for the fourth book of the Torah is numbers, but in Hebrew it's Bamidbar, which means in the desert. Herein lies the connection to Shavuos. For as reflected in the mitzvah of counting the Omer before the holiday, counting serves as a preparation for this holiday. What is unique about counting? How does counting prepare us for the giving of the Torah? Okay, the Medrash explains that Hashem desired a census for the Jewish people because he treasures them. It continues with an analogy. The Jews can be compared to a grain heap. Just as grain is counted when it's brought to the silo, so too the Holy One, blessed be He, wish that the Jews be counted at all times. The wording of the Midrash is somewhat problematic. Grain is dear to a mortal. He counts his harvest so that he will know how much grain he has. This does not apply with regard to Hashem. He always knows how many Jews there are. Why then does he require that they be counted? The Shalah is quoted in Chassidus stating that the Jews are counted to endow them with the status of a davar shebeminyan, an entity which is counted. That's a halachic term. It literally means a matter or a thing that's counted. Items which are sold in units and not by weight or volume. So the idea of nullifying, something we're familiar with. If you have 1/60th of something in something else, it gets nullified. Why did it get nullified? What happens if you take a drop of, I don't know, some really, really powerful potion and you put it into, and it's, let's say it's fleshik, it's meat. but it's really very potent. And you put it into a pot of milk, and you say, "Wow, this tastes different." You say, "Oh no, it's nothing. I put a drop of this stuff in. There's 60 times more milk than there is meat. Would it be permitted to eat it?"
No,
Why?
because first of all, you did it purposefully.
What?
You did it on purpose, right? This wasn't an
No, by
accident.
mistake. By mistake.
Oh, by mistake.
Let's say it's a
Then,
mistake.
then 1 to 60, yeah.
1 in 60. What happens to 1 in 60?
It's biddle.
It's buttle. It becomes
Oh,
nullified.
yeah.
But I just told you, the guy's saying, "Wow, I can taste something different in here." So clearly, it's not nullified, right? If you can taste it, it's not nullified. The whole idea of nullification only works if you can't taste it. If you can taste it, there's nothing to talk about. Then it's not nullified.
So even if it is the accidental 160, if it's too strong, no go.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you think about it logically, there's very little things in the world that could have 60 times the amount of it, and you should still taste it. But that's irrelevant. That's not the point. That's not the point. The point is that if you can taste it, it would not become buttle, because buttle is not a spiritual concept. It's a practical thing. It's overwhelmed to the degree that you don't taste it. It has no effect. So it's almost like it's not there. Now, the same over there, an entity which is counted doesn't become nullified. Why not? Because give you a simple, dumb example. You go to the store and you buy a bag of beans. Beans. You come home and you count them. It's like there's 5 beans less than last week's bag of beans. You go back to the store and tell the guy, "Hold it. You didn't give me a full bag this time." The guy looking, is like, "You think you're a nut? A bag of beans is a bag of beans. You know, you want to weigh it is one thing, but you're not going to count the beans. That's crazy." But I don't know if you ever see this in the store, but there are people who actually open up the container of eggs and count each egg and make sure it's not broken.
I'm one of them.
Huh?
I'm one of them.
You are one of them. Now, what would happen if you open up the container and there was 11 eggs? What would you do? You say,
Obviously, I put get another one.
Get another one, exactly. So beans you don't count, but eggs you do count. Okay, now that's logical. Eggs, you can count eggs, you can't count beans. But clearly, that egg, you can't say, "Well, it's 1 in 13, not a big, 1 in 12 is not a big deal." It is a big deal. I expect 12, give me 12. So that's an example of something which is counted. Now, obviously, if you're baking a cake, you're not counting the eggs. But I'm just giving an example of things that it's something that is counted. If it's counted, it's this amount, it doesn't become nullified. And if you would make a recipe with something and say, "Well, I need to put in 6 of these, whatever it might be," then that it takes on a certain value because each one counts. So therefore, the Shalah says, you know what? When Hashem counts the Jews, each one of them takes individual importance. And therefore, they can't be nullified. That's the halacha. Once it's a matter that it's counted, it doesn't get nullified. So Hashem counts the Jews to give them that value. And now he continues and gives the example. To illustrate the concept of the halachic analogy, when one part of a forbidden substance is mixed with more than 60 parts of kosher food, the forbidden food is considered batal, nullified. So one could think that the Jewish people, 1 lamb among 70 wolves. That's the famous quote. 1 lamb among 70 wolves might become nullified. Nevertheless, by commanding that the Jewish people be counted, Hashem endowed them with the importance inherent to an entity that is counted, and this prevents their existence from being nullified. So in that way, what's happening over here is Hashem is making us, giving us a quality that doesn't let us be overwhelmed. This rationale, however, is insufficient. Why? The reason an entity which is counted can never be nullified is because it possesses inherent significance. The fact that it is counted merely reflects the importance which exists. It doesn't produce it. So if you went into the store and you took your bag of beans and you counted them out and said, well, I know there's 364 beans. Last week I bought a bag of 365 beans. Give me another bean. The guy looked at you nuts. So what do you mean I'm nuts? I know how many beans I bought last week. He said, I don't care how many beans you bought last week. Nobody counts beans. By you counting them doesn't make every bean valuable. It makes you a beanhead or a nutcase, whatever. It doesn't work. So Hashem counts the Jews to make them valuable. It goes the other way around. Because it's valuable, therefore we count them. Because an egg is an egg. And therefore each one of them has its individual thing. That's why they make special containers that fit in 12 eggs, 18 eggs. So you're saying each one matters. Okay, we're making the containers so they don't smash, but that's not the point. The point is you're making individual spots. So each spot matters. The fact that you start counting them, if somebody wrote in a bag of noodles, there's 164 noodles here, no one's gonna sit there start counting them, make sure it's actually 164. Whatever it is, what it is, the bag of noodles. So the fact that Hashem counts the Jews doesn't make them valuable. To refer to an analog, the Jewish people are in essence important and worthy of being counted. Even if they were not counted, they were important. So why wasn't Esther going to be actually numbered? The Rebbe is asking the question from a different angle. Hashem counted the Jews and made them important? No. The Jews are important. Whether God counted them, didn't count them. So what does the counting accomplish? Say, oh, Hashem counted the Jews to show that they're not going to be nullified. What do you have to count them for? They're valuable. If someone says to you, how many diamonds do you have in your safe? I don't know. Oh, then they're not valuable. No, they are valuable. And so not counting them doesn't diminish their value. Counting something that has no value doesn't make it valuable. So what is the counting for? Since Parsha Midbar serves as a preparation for the giving of the Torah, the above questions can be answered by considering the change brought about by the event at Har Sinai. The giving of the Torah created a connection between the material and the spiritual. Before Sinai, mitzvahs did not affect the objects with which they were performed. They did not endow them with lasting holiness. The giving of the Torah affected a change, empowering the Jewish people to sanctify the material aspects of existence through the observance of mitzvahs. So this is a common concept, commonly known and discussed all over the place, in Chassidus anyway, that before the Torah was given, mitzvahs were done, but it didn't change the physical reality, the material reality. It allowed the Jews to do something. You know, it's like there are certain things that are a means to something else. You bring your wife flowers. Oh, that's so nice, bringing flowers. After 3 days, they're going into the garbage. Maybe 4. Right? They're not going to last forever. So it's a means to express something. It doesn't make the value itself. Compare the flowers to the wedding ring. Oh, the wedding ring. Very special. God forbid you should lose your wedding ring. Where is it? What happened? Don't worry about it. We're still married, which is true. You marry a woman with a ring and the next day she loses it. Like, okay, we're still married. The marriage is not you accept it, you had it, it's yours, you agreed to it, you're married, you don't need the ring. Not important. I mean, it's important, but it doesn't change the status. But it's a valuable thing. So there's certain things that have value within themselves, certain things that are just a means to accomplish something. The mitzvahs before the Torah were given were a way of expressing a connection to Hashem, but not that the object became sanctified. The object of the Jews' divine service after the giving of the Torah is to make the world holy, to transform it into a dwelling place for Hashem. For this reason, the importance of the Jewish people must be expressed in a way that can be appreciated by the material world. So now, after Mount Torah, the Jews have to affect the world. So the world has to recognize who they are. Even where the virtue of the Jewish people to be solely spiritual, this virtue could never be nullified within the worldly environment, for there's no way that any worldly circumstance can prevent the Jew from carrying out his divine mission. Now they're saying, what do you mean? What do you mean? Hashem endowed us with a mission. Hashem chose us as his people. Who gives a hoot what the world thinks about us? You can't change that. But in such an instance, the Jews' virtue would not influence their environment. The whole point is, we say that Hashem wants to have a dwelling place in this world, that the Jews have to affect the world to recognize Hashem. So you can't say the heck with the world. No, not the heck with the world. You have to affect the world. The world has to know you. When the Jews were actually counted, their inherent virtue was expressed by an activity that could be appreciated within the material world. This enabled that virtue to have an effect within the world. So what the Hashem is doing is like this. I want you to have an effect on the world. I need to connect you to the world somehow. How am I going to connect you to the world? I'm going to count you. When I count you, I'm expressing the number, each one of you. Now, not only is that virtue, is that value, something that I know and something that you know, now the world has heard it. On this basis, we can understand the connection between Parshat Bamidbar and the giving of the Torah. Taking a census of the Jews expressed their importance in a material way. This empowered the people to continue in their divine service within the material plane and make this world a dwelling place for Hashem. So now we understand Parshat Bamidbar comes before the giving of the Torah, because the giving of the Torah is meant so the Jews should be able to now be empowered to affect the world. So before we give the Torah, we say, you know what? The Jews are counted. It was expressed, and therefore their value now has been revealed within the world. Okay, that's one point about the counting that we have in this week's parsha. Now another point. The above explanation also helps us understand why the census involved only those above the age of 20, right? The Torah says, in the parsha says, Meben Esem Shana, right in the third pasuk of the parsha, that from 20 years old. On the surface, every Jew should have been counted, for the act endowed each with the power of an entity as counted, preventing a nullification among the Gentiles, right? The point is that now that you're valuable, you're not being overwhelmed by what's going on in the external world. Why then was the census limited to those above 20? So what? And somebody under 20 can do a mitzvah too and affect the world? This question can be resolved by focusing on the difference between the divine service performed by a Jew before he reaches the age of 20 and that performed after. Before 20, a Jew's primary efforts are centered on Torah study. Starting at age 5, he must spend 5 years studying the written law, then 5 years studying the Mishnah, and then 5 years studying the Talmud, as we learn in Pirkei Avot. Avot, chapter 5. We read this last Shabbos. Okay. Torah study is directed primarily inward. The intent is not to change the world, but to change oneself, right? Because Torah study is something you do for yourself. There's no active change in the world. And he quotes when Avram was called Zokain, which means one who acquires wisdom, Baba Yamim, he comes with his days. That's how he affected the world. It's two separate things. There's two separate stages in a person's life. There's two different activities a person engages in on a daily basis. You study Torah, you've connected yourself to Hashem. You do a mitzvah, you affect the world. Indeed, with regard to intellectual understanding in general, there is an advantage to solitude. Stay away from the world. At the age of 20, by contrast, a person becomes outwardly oriented. His efforts center on pursuit. Like it says, Ben Esrim Lirdaif, to pursue goals in the world. And at this age, a person becomes obligated for military service in the times of the Torah. He must go out and conquer the world. This is a spiritual parallel of the command, be fruitful and multiply, fill up the world and conquer it. In this way, one makes the world a dwelling place for Hashem through the observance of mitzvahs. Conquering doesn't mean going out with having wars with everybody. What it means is going out and transforming the world to godliness. In this context, it's important to note that the giving of the Torah and thus the recollection of the census which prepares us for it comes about through prefacing the promise we will do, observe the mitzvahs before we will listen and understand the Torah. See also look at the Torah. That's why before the Jews receive the Torah, they said we will do and we will listen. So the counting is an action, right? Which comes through the we will do part of it. So the same thing is also counting is an action. When the Jewish people, Hashem says, do you want the Torah? They say, we will do and we will listen. So the action comes before, and that's like, oh, they proceeded with doing before listening. So it wasn't dependent. That's exactly the same idea. If the Jews didn't get it, that their whole purpose is to do, then we're wasting our time. They missed the point. For this reason, the census did not include those below 20 years of age, for their fundamental concern is personal spiritual development, not the changing of the world. The essential virtue which every Jew possesses is sufficient to carry out that objective. When, however, a Jew attains the age of 20 and is charged with conquering the world at large, this intrinsic virtue must be expressed in a manner that will be noticed by the world at large. So at 20, that's when we count you. As mentioned above in the book about Midbar, is called numbers. A name, particularly a name in Lashon HaKodesh, in the Holy Tongue, expresses the essence of the object, right? That the Alter Rebbe says that in the second section of Tanya, expressed in great length. Since the entire book is called numbers because of the census described in the first reading, it follows that this census contains a fundamental element of the book. Counting does more than communicate inherent importance. It generates a positive quality in of itself. And because of this positive quality, Parashat Bamidbar prepares us for the holiday of Shavuos, just as the counting of the Omer prepares us for Shavuos. For with regard to the counting of the Omer, the concept of revealing inherent virtue does not apply. So now we got to say, wait a second, counting is important. So we said before, counting gives you a value. But there's got to be more than that. It's not, I'm counting you so that people know that you're valuable. When I count you, that alone makes you valuable. Not I'm doing it to reveal it to somebody else. It gives you a value. The same way that counting the Omer. Why do you count the Omer? What does it do? It makes something holy there. The positive aspect of counting is that all are equal. The great are not counted as more, nor are the small counted as less. Right? We're counting things, how many things you have, how many people are there, they're all equal. One digit for each. Although there are various different levels among the Jewish people in the census, each is counted as each one is counted the same. In this, there's a parallel to counting the Omer for all the differences between the days. There's Shabbos, there's Pesach, days of Chol HaMoed, Rosh Chodesh. When counting the Omer, all days are counted the same. So in these 49 days, you start counting the second day of Yontif of Pesach. You count the Chol HaMoed, you count on Shabbos, you count on Rosh Chodesh, but it's all one day. Every day is one day. Counting all Jews as one reflects the essence of the soul, a quality possessed by all Jews equally. With regard to our revealed conscious powers, intellect, and emotion, however, there are differences between one Jew and another. With regard to the essence of the soul, by contrast, all are the same. So the counting reveals the sameness. You have Jews that one learns more Torah, does more mitzvahs. There's so many different levels of Jews. How can you count each one as a single digit? See, there's 10 Jews here. 10 Jews or 10 different personalities, 10 different perspectives, so different one from the other. But the essence is all one. In that, they're all equal. There's a fundamental difference between the divine service associated with the revealed powers and the divine service associated with the essence of the soul. So what difference is it? Why do you have to count? Why do you have to reveal the essence? Who cares? With regard to the revealed powers of intellect and emotion, each person's individual identity causes him to see himself as distinct from Hashem. Thus, the person observes the Torah and its mitzvahs because his understanding and feelings can compel him to do so. So if you talk about intellect and emotion, does that bring you closer to Hashem or does it cause a distance? So you could argue that if it's based on intellect and emotion, it's your intellect, it's your emotion. That's not making an absolute unity. It's making a closeness. It's creating a relationship, but it's not an absolute oneness because I decided it makes sense. It's all about me making a decision. But when he awakens and reveals the essence of a soul, the one which affirms your oneness, right? Because the oneness of the soul is connected to the oneness of Hashem. He realized that the very core of his being one is with godliness. As it says, Yisrael and the Torah and the Holy One, blessed be He, are all one. So when you get down to the core of it, that's where there's a bond between all as one. The essence of the soul common to all Jews is expressed in the counting of the Eimer, in which all the days are considered equal. From the standpoint of intellect and emotion, there's differences one day to another. The ordinary weekdays are not the same as Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos, or the festivals, right? Clearly, we behave differently in those days. On these special days, a person's divine service is charged with vitality. But when it comes to an ordinary weekday, when one must fulfill the charge, know in all your ways, a person may not feel any special vitality, right? Here you are, you're getting up, you're fixing your plumbing, you're hocking hair, you're doing this, you're doing that. Oh, I'm a Jew, I feel amazing. What do you feel amazing? You go running to a store, you're buying potatoes, tomatoes, apples, bananas. What are you on a high about? There's nothing to be high about. When by contrast, a person awakens the essence of his soul and the entire substance of his being is oneness with Hashem, this affects his intellect and emotion as well, causing them to approach weekdays with the same energy as Shabbos and the festivals. Regardless of what the person is doing, his efforts will be permeated by godliness. So there's the greater challenge. To be godly on Shabbos and Yom Tov is almost easy. I mean, it's a challenge, but it's easy. When it comes to a regular Wednesday or Thursday, how are you going to be close to Hashem then when you're doing mundane activities? But if you're able to recognize, I am a Jew in essence, that's who I am, that's my whole being, then you have to feel godliness in everything that you do. On this basis, we can appreciate how the senses of the Jewish people and the counting of the Omer both serve as a preparation for the commemoration of giving the Torah. The Ten Commandments again, I am Hashem your God. Godliness is not an incremental element of one's existence, but is an Elehecha, which is interpreted as meaning your strength and your vitality. When a person comes to this awareness, he serves God not through the study of Torah and the observance of its mitzvahs, but in every aspect of his life. So it's not limited to Torah, to study of Torah and mitzvahs, but everything you do is focused on this. I have to use this in some way to connect to Hashem. The fact that the commemoration of the giving of the Torah requires both the recollection of the senses and the counting of the Omer. So now, wait a second. If counting brings out the essence, why do you have to have the counting of Chumash Bamidbar and the counting of the Omer? Because each contributes an element which is lacking in the other. Both are necessary to prepare us for receiving the Torah. The senses focuses on counting Jews, nothing else. The counting of the Omer, as its name implies, involves counting other entities, the number of days which have passed since the Omer was brought. This reflects a connection with our divine service. So when you're counting Jews, it's talking about the Jews' connection to Hashem. When you count the Omer, it's talking about how the person affects the world. One may infer that the senses of the Jewish people is associated with the essence of the soul, which is perfect at all times. Yep, that makes sense. You're counting the Jews, you're revealing the essence of the Jew. The essence of the Jew is always whole and one with Hashem. With regard to this level, no divine service is necessary because this potential is sometimes hidden. Counting all as equals arouses and reveals it. Okay. So when you count the Jew, you're revealing that oneness. That's very nice. You're revealing that oneness. But that's a oneness that every Jew has with Hashem. The counting of the Omer contrast refers to the toil with our revealed powers, both the godly soul and the animal soul. which we must refine and elevate, right? Because that's the whole idea of counting the Omer, which was the offering of animal feed. This involves a two-phase process. First comes the general influence created by bringing the Omer offering. And then more particular effort is reflected in an endeavor to refine a single emotional quality on each of the 49 days of the counting. That's why you have 49 days, because you have 7 emotional elements. Each one is made up of the other. So altogether, you have 49. We have 7, okay, it says that in the parentheses. Okay. So the counting of the Jewish people is the essence of the Jew. Counting the Omer is the way a Jew expressed himself in the world. Based on the above, we can appreciate why the mitzvah of counting the Omer is incumbent on every person as an individual, rather than one nation as a collective. There's no one person counting. Every Jew counts the Omer. Since the counting then reflects on the effort on the part of every person who finds revealed powers. There are differences between the forms of one Jew and another. Thus, it's possible that one Jew will have a different reckoning than the other, or will not count the Omer at all. With regard to the census of the Jewish people by Cantus, all Jews are counted equally, for the counting relates to the essence of the soul, which everybody has equally. So it comes to the Omer, every person has to count the Omer, because that's talking about your self-refinement. Your self-refinement, you have to do it on your own. But if you're talking about counting the Jews' essence, the above all does not contradict the statement that with regarding to the counting of the Omer, all the days, Shabbos, holidays, and weekdays are the same. That because the counting is connected with the essence of the soul, one's service on Shabbos and festivals is the same as one's divine service during the weekday. Our divine service during the counting of the Omer involves drawing down the soul's essential light to our individual powers, elevating those powers to the essence. It's a pretty heavy statement. Our divine service during the counting of the Omer involves drawing down the soul's essential light to our individual powers, elevating those powers to the essence. You're taking the essence, which means the concept of I essentially am a Jew, and letting it express itself through your thoughts and actions, and your thought, your action, your speech, and that accomplishes that. It elevates them to that higher level. This is alluded in the command: you shall count from the day after the day of rest. You should count from the day after the Shabbos. Usfartem, you shall count, relates to the word sapir, referring to a shining sapphire. An analogy, the light of the soul's essence. The term from the day after the Shabbos implies that this light should be transmitted. So you count, usfartem, you should take the illumination after Shabbos, meaning you have the power of Shabbos, the essence of the soul, and you should take it to the next level. You should bring it outside. The sense of the Jewish people arouses the essence of the soul and spurs it to express itself in the world. The intent of the counting of the Omer is to refine our conscious powers and lift them to the level at which a person's conduct becomes a fitting expression of his soul's essence. Right? So we want the essence and the person himself to become connected. On this basis, we can appreciate both the census and the counting of the Omer are necessary before the commemoration of the giving of the Torah. As mentioned previously, the giving of the Torah brought about a fusion between the spiritual and the material. This fusion was twofold in nature. The highest realms of the spiritual descended to the lower realms of the material. And the lower realms of the material ascended to the higher realms of the spiritual. Okay. A parallel exists within our souls. The essence of the soul, the higher realm, should be joined to our conscious powers, the lower realm. This enables our conscious powers to appreciate godliness as an integral part of their existence, just as the essence of the soul is cleaving to you, the one which affirms your oneness. So the essence of the soul affects the lower realms, but then what? but then it rises up. This concept is also reflected in the command, I'm God, your God. Anochi refers to God's essence, a level above our comprehension, and which is joined to the essence of our souls. This level becomes the lekecha, the power and life energy internalized within the Jewish people. Anochi is the essence of Hashem. Elekecha is your power. That means it becomes part of you, every Jew. Therefore, before the giving of the Torah, two phases are necessary. Faith, number one, a stage of preparation, draws down and reveals the essence of the soul. This accomplishes the sense of the Jewish people. And then comes stage two, a stage of preparation involving the cultivation of our conscious powers until they can serve as receptors for that essence. Come to the counting of the Yomer.
Ugh.